Hey guys, welcome back to another video from the channel Learn from Basics. This is Joe here, and this is the first video on this series in this channel where we build up our algorithmic thinking skills. So, in programming, it is very important that you think like a programmer because not only should you learn the syntax of a programming language and understand how you can write code in a programming language, but you also have to learn how you can make algorithms to solve problems using a program. And the best way to build up your algorithmic thinking skills is by simply solving problems. And that's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to solve a bunch of problems from HackerRank, LeetCode, USACO, and etc. to build up our algorithmic thinking skills. So without any further ado, let's get started. And please note that I'm going to be writing my code in Python, but it doesn't matter what programming language we're using, since the main thing about this course is to actually learn about the logic and learn about how to think like a programmer. And with that being said, I would recommend that you have some background with either Python or any other programming language so you can follow along. So again, let's get started with our first problem. And this one's fairly simple. It's simply write a program to check whether a given number is even or odd. So what I would ask you to do is pause the video and try this program out for yourself. I hope you gave it a try. Now let's work through this problem together, alright? So the first thing I'm going to do before actually solving this problem and writing our code is writing some pseudocode. You might be wondering, what is pseudocode? Well, pseudocode, let me type that down. Pseudocode is basically like brainstorming but in computer science. Whenever you write pseudocode, you formulate or you create an algorithm to solve a certain problem, and you write that algorithm in plain English. So instead of writing an algorithm in Python or any programming language, you're going to write it in plain English so you have an idea of what your algorithm is going to do. And remember, an algorithm is nothing but a series of steps that will be executed by your program to solve a certain problem or give a certain output. So again, we're going to write an algorithm to solve this problem. And before we actually write that algorithm in Python, we're going to write some pseudocode for it. So it's easier for us to actually convert this algorithm into Python since we know what all the steps that our algorithm have to do are. So the first step our algorithm has to do is actually take the input from our user, right? Because we have to write a program to check whether a given number. So we have to take an input from the user. So take input from the user. Yeah, from the user. And the input has to be an integer. So that's important. Now the second step in our algorithm is to check whether a given number is even or odd. So we have to check whether a given number is even or odd, right? Because that's what the problem statement asks us. And then we have to print the result. We have to print whether the number is even or odd. So without any further ado, let's get started. This is the pseudocode, and this is what our algorithm will be doing. Let's convert this code into Python. And again, if you didn't get this algorithm before, I would recommend that you try to pause and convert this into Python or any other programming language of your choice and try to get it to run. Okay, so I hope you gave it a try. Now let's work through this and let's convert this into Python together. So let's go step by step. Our first step in our program is to take input from the user, and the input has to be an integer. So again, I'm going to create a variable called number, and we're going to use the input function to take the input from the user, and we're going to store that value number in the variable number. Now you have to remember that the input function in Python takes input in the form of a string, but we want it to be an integer, right? So since we want it to be an integer, we can simply wrap this input function around with an int function, and the int function basically converts a string to an integer. So the input function is going to return a string answer, and then the int function is going to convert that string answer into an integer. And then we're going to store that in the variable number. And just to make this a bit more user-friendly, inside here we're going to type in something like, give us your number. And basically, the program is going to print this out before asking the user input, so the user actually knows what value they have to give us, right? And let's run this program real quick just to see how far we've got. So again, it's Python or Python 3, depending on how you saved Python in your root directory. And you can do this by installing Python. There's a bunch of courses on YouTube. Space and the name of the file that you're using, in this case even odd.py. And if you open this in VS Code, that's all you're going to have to do and your program should run. And as you can see, it asks us give us a number. Give us your number, let's say like 4. And of course, nothing happens right now because we don't have any code to decide whether the number is even or odd, but we'll get to that really soon. And speaking of getting to that really soon, that's our second step, to check whether a given number is even or odd. So, how are we going to check if a given number is even or odd? Well, to do this, we're actually gonna use, or we're gonna exploit a really cool mathematical feature or mathematical behavior, and that's the fact that whenever you divide an even number by 2, you get a remainder of 0. And also, whenever you divide an odd number by 2, you get a remainder of 1. And you can test this out with any even or odd number, and you'll see this is how it turns out. If I were to divide like 5 divided by 2, the remainder would be 1, right? And if I were to divide something like 4 divided by 2, the remainder is 0, right? That's just how it works. Again, 5 divided by 2, remainder is 1, and 4 divided by 2, the remainder would be 0. So all our program would have to do is it would have to get the remainder. It would have to basically divide two numbers, divide the given number by 2, and get the remainder. So after it gets the remainder, compare if the remainder is 1 or 0. And of course, if it is 1, then it is an odd number. If it is 0, then it is an even number. So that's how we're going to decide whether a number is even or odd. These are the steps that we're going to go through. We're going to divide the given number by 2 and get the remainder of that division. And then we're going to compare if the remainder is either 1 or 0. If it is 1, it's an odd number. If it's 0, it is an even number. So you might be wondering, well, how are we going to find the remainder whenever we divide two numbers? Well, in computer science, you can use something called the mod function, which is represented by the percentage sign, to find the remainder of the division of two numbers. So if I were to do something like 5 mod 2, my answer would be 1, because whenever you divide 5 by 2, you get a remainder of 1. Now this is different from the division operator, because if I were to do 5 divided by 2, I would get 2, because whenever you divide 5 by 2, the quotient of that operation would be 2, and the remainder of that operation would be 1. So that's just the basic difference between a mod function and a division function. So we can use the mod function to find to get the remainder, right? So let's try that out. So I'm just gonna print it for now, but later on we can turn it into an actual program. We can say print number mod 2, right? So again, let's run our program. Give us your number. If I were to do say 5, you see how the remainder is 1. However, if I were to say something like 4, the remainder is 0. And this works with any even or odd number. Let's give it this really big odd number. The remainder is 1. Let's give it this really big even number. The remainder is 0, right? So now that we can find the remainder of two numbers, we have to compare if the remainder is 0 or 1. And we can compare using the if condition. So we can say, instead of printing this out, we can say, okay, if number mod 2, and to compare, we can say the equal to sign. If number mod 2 is equal to 0, then we want to print even, because that means the number is even. However, if the number mod 2 is equal to 1, we can print odd. Now, I hope we all understand the fact that if number mod 2 is not equal to 0, it can only be equal to 1, right? Because whenever you divide a number by 2, the remainder can either be 0 or 1. That's just how it works. And also, if a number is not even, it has to be odd, right? There's no other way that you can define a number. That's why instead of adding another if statement over here, instead we can just add an else statement. So we can say, okay, computer, if the number mod 2 is equal to 0, then the number is even. But if it is not, if this statement is false, which is what the else statement basically says, then the number is odd. So instead of writing two if conditions, we can just say if and then add an else condition. So let's run this program again to test how it works. Again, if I were to say something like 9, you can see it gives us odd. And if we were to say something like, let's say 64, it gives us even. So that's great and all. We got our program to work. And again, this implementation should almost be similar to any other programming language such as Java or C++. It's just that the syntax should be different. Now, something that won't be similar to other programming languages is this cool way where you can, instead of writing all of this code, I can do the same thing. I can do all of this. I can do whatever all these 4 lines of code are doing in a matter of in a matter of 1 line. So I can do all of this in using just 1 line of code. You might be wondering, well, how am I going to do that? Well, I can do that by using the cool syntax features that Python has. Since Python is Python is known for using a very minimum amount of lines of code in order to achieve something. So I'm going to write down the code that it would take to actually perform this in 1 line, and then I'll explain it to you guys. So this is the code that it would take, and let's just run that real quick, just to make sure that it works. Again, 9, it says odd, 4, it says even. It works. So let's explain this. So there's this cool feature in Python where I can write an if condition inside a print statement, so I can choose between printing 2 different strings or 2 different things inside a print statement using an if condition. So I can say, okay, so if the condition inside this if statement is true, I want you to print whatever is over here. But if it is not, I want you to print whatever is over here. And you can only use an if and else statement to do this. You can't use like an if and elif statement. That's just not how it works. You can just use an if and else statement. And of course, over here, there can be this condition inside the if statement can be whatever you want. And you can also use like an and operator or an or operator. Those work too. But you just can't use an elif inside a print statement. But you can use this syntax to write all of this code in just 1 line of code, which is really cool. And that's what makes Python so popular. It's the fact that you can do a lot in very few lines of code. Alright guys, that's the algorithm that we formed to solve this really simple problem in Python. And of course, you can convert this to any other programming language. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe subscribe. And of course, there's going to be many more problems that we're going to solve. So yeah, most importantly, subscribe and turn on the notifications. See you guys in the next one. Bye bye.